Vibe coding, it has taken the internet by storm. Some hate it, some love it, but regardless, it has allowed a lot more people to build cool shit. Now, first of all, vibe coding is coding guided by intuition and feelings. You sit down, you tell your IDE or whatever vibe coding tool that you're using what you want to achieve, and this will help you to achieve it. It will allow you, who maybe don't know how to code, to do something that just a couple of years ago would have required in-depth, detailed coding, programming, and software engineering knowledge, whereas now anyone can do it. It has democratized creation, and it has allowed a lot more ideas to materialize into real products. It is less about typing every character in every piece of code and more about steering a co-pilot. Just like you'd hop in a plane, and 50 years ago you would have to steer this plane over the Atlantic all the way from London to New York, whereas now you take off, you tell the plane what to do, the plane steers itself, and you, maybe if you want to, perform the landing in New York. And it's a little bit similar with coding. 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and especially 50 years ago, if you wanted to achieve something with code, you had to write out every single piece of code yourself. You couldn't just sit back in the pilot seat, vibe along, and watch this co-pilot do it for you. You had to do every single thing by yourself. But now we're in a little similar way, more close to pilots than we were before, because now you can create the project, you can provide some context, you can provide word cues as opposed to having to write it all about yourself, and you can lean back in your office chair and you can just follow along with the vibe. And it's pretty incredible how good this has gotten. I will show you some examples later on how you can use vibe coding in your own project, and let me tell you, it's gonna blow your mind. So what are some of the advantages of vibe coding? First of all, there is context understanding. So if you are coding and you're working with other people, maybe you are expert in some parts of the code base. Right now, you have something that's called context awareness, in that this AI tool that's helping you has the context of all of your files, and it can access all of these files and understand them rapidly, much more rapid than a human could. And here comes the first fundamental piece of knowledge. First of all, you need to understand your code base to some degree, because once your code base starts to grow and the AI starts to write more and more lines of code and create more files inside of your project, you will need to understand what you're gonna prompt it to change, because you will still need to prompt it to do some changes and make some edits, but you do need to understand what you're telling it to edit. So the first fundamental is to let it be your co-pilot, but still keep your head up and look through the window as you're flying along, because you need to be understanding of what you're doing so that you can prompt it properly. The number two fundamental principle of vibe coding is rapid iteration. The whole benefit of vibe coding is that we are able to rapidly iterate on our ideas. We can take something that we come up with as an idea, and then 5 minutes later we can pretty much have an MVP built. And I'm going to show you exactly in a little bit what I mean with this, but use this to your advantage. Don't get too caught up in the idea that you have, but get caught up on the problem that you want to solve, and do everything in your power in order to solve this problem, regardless if that's with this type of software product or this type of software product. Fall in love with the process, not the product in and of itself. Rapidly iterate, create, discard, create, discard, create, discard, create, maybe discover that something works, and then iterate on that. I think this is where the most efficient people are gonna differentiate themselves from the masses, in that most people will just vibe code in the exact same way that they would code otherwise, i.e. they would create a spec, they would build a very detailed product, and then only to realize that they're not really solving a real problem. Real differentiators will vibe code something, an MVP really quickly, discard it if it doesn't work, and if it works, they will iterate on that and make something better. So that is the number two fundamental principle of vibe coding. Iterate rapidly. The fundamental principle number three is to keep your code base AI friendly. And what I mean here is that any code that you write as a human should be clearly documented. You should comment it out. You should clearly display what it's doing. You should be clear with naming, how you're naming files and how you're naming functions inside of your code. That if you're collaborating with AI, you make it easy for AI to understand the code that you're writing. Also make sure to set up some guidelines for how your AI is supposed to act. For example, if you're using Cursor, you can create a rules file in order to tell it specifically how to act in certain situations and what to work on. The next fundamental principle is to document the prompts that work well. What you will find is that different prompts inside of these tools, such as Cursor, such as Lovable, such as Windsurf, such as Copilot, will have different results. And some of these results will be a lot better than others. So if you have something that you find that works really well, for example, you give your mobile app a specific prompt that you want to change, for example, all of the UI to something specific, and you found that, wow, this worked really well. Document this prompt, because more than likely you will be needing and you will be finding that you're going to need this prompt in the future. So if you can save that particular prompt that ended up working really well for you, then hey, fantastic. You probably saved yourself a little bit of work and a little bit of time in the future. Create the prompt library. You can do this in your Notes app, for example, on your computer, or a random Word document or an Excel sheet, and just say this prompt, what it achieved, how well it worked, and then you can go back and you can refer to this in the future so that you save yourself time instead of having to discover which prompts work really well for which type of environment. Next up is be overly detailed. So the fifth fundamental principle of vibe coding is that when you want to change something, you need to be as detailed as possible. If you, for example, want to change something into a darker vibe, don't just say, make this a darker vibe. Instead, give it a very detailed prompt, i.e. all of the buttons on this left-hand side of the page that are currently white and slightly rounded, make them a little bit darker, preferably gray, and do it in a way so there's a little bit of shadow. And if you give it more detailed prompts like this, especially in regards to UI, you will find that it will one shot, i.e. it will create good stuff from the beginning a lot more often than if you just give it short, undetailed prompts. This is also applicable when you're doing things such as functions. So if you want the code to, or if you want your tool to write a function of some kind, then be as specific as you can with the output that this function to create. So for example, if you want this function to fetch something from an API, you want to transform it into a JSON file, and then you want to store this JSON file inside of the app, be as specific as you can. How should it store it? Where should it store it? What type of fields should it expect? Are they strings? Are they integers? Are they date times, for example? Be as specific as you can when you're given these prompts, and you will find that your AI will perform much better. Now we know some of the fundamental steps, and you will obviously have then different levels of vibe coding. For example, there's sites such as Windsurf or Lovable. This is completely AI assisted, and you don't really need to provide any input yourself if you don't want to. You will just tell it a prompt and it will go ahead and it will code something for you. Then you have something that's a little bit more hands-on, such as Cursor AI. So Cursor AI is an IDE where you write code. And this is also AI enabled in that you're able to give it prompts and you're able to tell it what to do, but you're also able to code yourself, and you're probably expected to code yourself to some degree. So this is something where you're more AI enabled rather than AI created entirely, because you will need to do some output in yourself, and you'll need to understand the file structure and the stuff that the files do in a little bit more detail than you would in a program such as Lovable or Windsurf. And the next level is something like GitHub Copilot. So GitHub Copilot is really just an enabler in that it auto-completes code for you. You can also give it some prompts now, etc., but it's not as good at that, and it's not as independent as Cursor or Lovable or Windsurf, for example. So this is more for you if you still want to write your own code, but you want to get suggestions on autocompletes, for example. You want to be able to ask it questions about your code base. You want to be able to have it write specific functionality, but maybe not write your entire app. This is for you. So obviously Lovable and Windsurf don't require any coding and knowledge at all. Cursor.ai, I would say, requires some coding understanding, but at least a little bit of software engineering understanding. And GitHub Copilot, today maybe not as much, but a little bit more than the other, require at least some understanding of coding. So those are the principles. Now I'm going to hop on the computer. I'm going to show you quickly how to vibe code a quick mobile app using Cursor AI. Okay, so here we have a basic Flutter app, and we've opened it in Cursor. This is just creating a basic Flutter, empty Flutter project inside of Cursor. It's super simple to do. You can definitely Google or YouTube yourself to it, what you need in order to do this. So this is Cursor. What we can then do is that we can actually close this, and we can just give it the entire libs folder as context. So we can, for example, search for lib. And what we're saying then is that we're saying, look through the files inside of the lib folder in order to be able to tell us what to do. And then we're going to build something called a Pomodoro timer. So a Pomodoro timer, it's looked something like this. It's a timer that's used for productivity. So you can use something like this, you use it in your kitchen. But in the productivity world, it's something where you time everything that you're doing in order to be as productive as possible. So we're going to write create a dark minimalist style Pomodoro timer with some soft micro interactions. It should add up to total time per day and give you random motivational So we're going to tell it that, and then this agent mode is going to go out and work. So in Cursor, you got 3 different modes. First of all, you got manual, which is where you're going to give it specific instructions on where to edit stuff. If you're really vibe coding, I wouldn't really go with manual. Ask is going to be where you can ask questions about your code base if you want to understand something. Maybe you're hopping into someone else's code base, then ask is the perfect thing. For most things, you're going to be using agent. This is where it's going to go out and it's going to write code for itself. So there we can see, I'm going to accept this file, for example, and it's created all of this stuff. So we can say play, and we're going to see it's going to start counting down from 25. So this is the focus timer that we have. I can then pause it. For example, we can restart it. And I guess once I've taken the whole 25 minutes, it will add up to the focus time today. And then we can do some pretty cool things. For example, make the total today a line chart. Like so, and we can just vibe our way through edits. So then it will tell us which functions to run. We can just click a small button here in order to run this function, for example, and then it will literally code this out for us. And now this is on an iOS simulator. So this is fully functional code that you're able to use in an application. Obviously, you need to publish it on the App Store and download it to your phone, but just in one prompt, one shot, we call it in the vibe coding world, we've been able to generate a simple app. And obviously, you would probably need to add more value to this in order to make it a viable app. Maybe you'd need to add some screen blocking time, for example, or you'd need to add some progress time, or you need to add some social feature in order to make it truly valuable. But you get the gist of the idea. And then we can rerun it, and then we're getting some errors. So now we're getting these errors. We can actually take this debug console. We can copy these errors. And we can say, copy that, and we can say, getting these errors, please fix. And now, in total, we have created 3 prompts, and we're gonna be able to fix this probably with just 3 prompts. We're gonna see if we can get this going. Otherwise, I mean, we're pretty sufficient for the demo here. This is a versioning issue, but I guess it's not a major thing. So we're going to rebuild, and there we go. So if we start logging our time there, obviously start working to see our progress. Now I need to complete these 25 minutes in order to see the progress, but you get the gist of the idea. We can then make some other small comments. For example, we can go into the main. We can use the main as the context by pressing Command L, and then we can say, make the color purple instead. And then it will kind of infer what it is that I mean should be purple. And then it will make the color scheme purple in a way that it thinks it's appropriate, like so. And then we can continue this Pomodoro timer and count down the productivity. So that is one way of using vibe coding. You can obviously go into much more detail. I just did this with 3 prompts. With 300 or 3,000 prompts, you can do a lot more than I just did. But it's pretty cool what we're able to achieve with tools like this. So Cursor is something to check out. Lovable is something to check out. Windsurf is something to check out. They'll be all linked down in the description. It's no sponsorship whatsoever. I just think that they're fantastic tools. So ladies and gentlemen, that was the video. If you like this type of content, then feel free to subscribe. It's completely free of charge. If you want to start building your own products, and if you're already building your products, then definitely don't forget to join my WOP community called the Micro-SAAS Catalyst. I share some of my learnings in regards to building Micro-SAAS products and how I monetize them. I also share some of the templates that you can use yourself to launch your own Micro-SAAS projects. If there's anything else you want to see, or if there's anything else you like, let me know down below and I answer all the comments. With that said, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.